We're going to talk about taxes, and we're going to talk about First Nations and treaties and how it all came about. And we're going to talk about taxes and First Nations Trust Fund. Now, what started taxes and what started Indian Affairs, First Nations tax? And where did treaties come from? Well, first of all, let's talk about social assistance. Let's talk about that. That seems to be a big issue for a lot of people today. A lot of people think and believe that taxpayers support welfare clients. They believe that welfare is covered by taxes. But let's get this straight today. I'm going to tell you, taxes does not cover welfare. It does not pay into social assistance. It actually doesn't even benefit at all. Now here check this out. Where does welfare come from? Who pays the expenses? Well, here it is. Here's the truth you've all been waiting for. It comes from treaties, the First Nations Trust Fund. Welfare is covered. Social assistance is the same thing as welfare. Just social assistance is a more proper way to say it. Well, first of all, there's about 4.3 million applicants on assistance, so you call it, in Canada alone, just Canada. Now, there isn't even 4.3 million natives in America and Canada put together, okay? There's less than 70,000 First Nations that depend on social assistance. There are more than 4 million non-Aboriginals that depend on social assistance. A lot of people think all Indians are on welfare, social assistance, but we're not. The majority of us won't even go on it. You know, I've had to depend on it a couple times. Shit happens. But First Nations cover social assistance. We pay for that. It comes from the treaties. What treaties, you say? The treaties that were made when Europe and Spain invaded America and Canada. Look up the history of Turtle Island. Look up how Canada was built, how it started. Those treaties protect your freedom, protect the people's freedom and rights. If it weren't for treaties, you would be paying a lot more taxes to be in our country. You would be paying a lot more taxes. So don't be whining and crying about taxpayers pay everything. Taxpayers actually benefit from First Nations Trust Fund because they borrow money from us. What money, you say? The money that pays for your roads, the money that pays for your power, the money and the trees and the lumber and the gravel. That has to do with all that. What do you think builds your homes? Wood, cement. Where does that come from? It comes from land, somebody's land. They didn't bring it from Europe and ship it over here. No, it comes from Native American land or Canada. The lumber that comes off of our land is used to build your homes, used to build these power lines. Now that costs money. That money gets put into a First Nations Trust Fund, and it sits there. It sits there so it benefits the community, not just the band and not just the natives, because we hardly get to even touch that money. That money is there for everybody. We made sure, because that's what we wanted. That's why we fought so hard for the same rights. And that is why all children in Canada under the age of 12 have free medical, because the chiefs of Canada fought for that. All children get that same right. That all has to come from somewhere. How did the First Nations Trust Fund start? Well, in 1701, $28 million, which is like $40 million American or euros, that was put into a trust fund due to a treaty that was made. Well, during that time, it built interest. Millions and millions of dollars of interest, and throughout 100 years, it grew billions of dollars of interest. And then during the Civil War, Britain British borrowed some money from that. They had to pay it back with compound interest. They had to pay it back with interest, and they did. And then America borrowed money from the First Nations Trust Fund, but they took that money and they started buying chunks of America off of France. So they bought the state of Louisiana for less than $15 million, and that's half of America. You should see all those states were the history of Louisiana. You know, that was pretty dirty to borrow money from the First Nations Trust Fund and then buy the land off of France or another country that came and took it over. And then that's why we went to war, because people didn't like that. There was people coming here killing tribes, stealing land, taking land, and then just cropping, while other countries didn't approve of that. So they sent troops, and there was war. Europe against British and France and French and the English. They all battled it out because they were tired of what was happening. Indians were dying left and right for nothing, for no reason at all. Over greed. And today there's less than 500,000 Indians in Canada. Less than 1% of the American population is indigenous. Think about that for a second. There's over 300 million people in America. Not even 1% is Native American. And another thing, we don't get to practice our culture. We were put in residential schools. I wasn't allowed to practice my culture in residential school. I wasn't allowed to have a feather or anything. I actually had everything stripped and ripped right off of me. My hair cut off, bald. And I had to go to church 3 times a day. And I used to speak Cree. I wasn't allowed to speak my language. But today, 2017, they say people have rights. The right to practice their traditions. But, you know, when we sit here and we're like, we won't allow the Indians to practice their traditions, but we're not allowed to hold a feather and pray, because that's just dangerous. You know, I don't know why. Why are you so scared of us? You hate us. You almost wiped us out. You stole all of our land, all our money, all our resources. We're not dumb. We know where your gold comes from, and your diamonds and your pearls that you wear. It all comes from native land. All the diamond mines in Canada, all the diamond stores in Canada, those diamonds come from native land. Held in trust by the Queen, but she's selling our land? How is that? We don't need her to hold our land. We can hold our own land. Give it back. Hold on. I'm ordering a coffee here, so I'm going to have to put you on hold. Alright. So I'm back. I'm getting a coffee because I need a coffee. I don't need a coffee. I want a coffee. There's a difference there. You know, we'd have money. See, people would have more money if they watched how they spent their money. Once in a while, I'm going to grab a coffee. I'm thirsty for a coffee. But yeah, you need to stop being afraid of us Indians. We don't have no nukes. We don't have no grenades or bombs or army bases. So we're not going to drop bombs on your country. Let me tell you different types of natives. There's tribes. There's different tribes. It doesn't mean we're all the same. There's Mayans. There's First Nations. There's all kinds of tribes. There's tribes in Africa. There's tribes in the Amazon forest. Those are not all First Nations. They're not all Indians. They're all different tribes. Just have the name Indigenous. We all share the same Indigenous name. There's not too many First Nations left in America and Canada. As a matter of fact, there are less than 5 million altogether. That's including Alaska, okay? When you search Google, you're going to type in Aboriginal population in Canada. It's going to give you a number like 1.4 million. But don't get that twisted up, okay? Doesn't mean there's 1.4 million Indians in Canada. 1.4 Aboriginal. Well, let me define Aboriginal. Aboriginal in Canada, what they're saying is all together, because they want to make the number sound big, so they put Aboriginal, because technically there's only 480,000 Indians in Canada with a status card. That's it. And then there's about 400,000 Métis and about 450,000 Inuits. Inuit from like way up north, Nunavut. Okay? They're not First Nation. Neither are Métis. So if you minus those two, there still is only 480,000 First Nations. But if you add the Métis and Inuit together, that leaves you to 1.4 million. Okay? So, it just comes to tell you, there's a population of about 30 million people in Canada, I believe. And we're still being killed. Over 1,100 of our women have gone missing. I know it costs a lot of money to search for somebody, but who's going to put up that money? They know a lot of us don't have that money because they have us controlled. Like, we're in a certain... We can't have money, because with money comes power, and with power, you have the power to fight for the rights. And as soon as we start fighting for rights, become more feared of us, because they know we'll be restoring those treaties, and they'll be paying a lot more than just taxes. They'll be paying into a First Nations trust tax fund. It's actually, that tax money only benefits taxpayers. It only benefits taxpayers. It's what pays and hires people to build your roads. You know, when you got school, teachers, they all have to be paid. That's not going to come from some rich person's pocket. And it doesn't always come from taxes. There's more money coming from First Nations treaties and land than what taxes are paid. There's over $4.2 trillion in the First Nations Trust Fund right now, today, and this is 2017. We're not entitled to that, though. You know, they're holding that money and trying to make us forget about it, but we're not going to forget. We build an annual interest of over $35 billion yearly. Yet, we don't have any upgraded homes. They say they send money to reserves for homes. When's the last time a home is being upgraded on a reserve or built? Every year, $1 million and some is supposed to go to every reserve for housing and upgrading and education and medical and all this other stuff. Roads and snow plowers and gravel. That's what's supposed to cover it. But who's getting that money? Because nobody's getting it. They say Indians get free education. I'm at school right now in the parking lot. I have to pay for my parking pass. I have to pay to go to school. I just finished paying a tuition. You know, and we have to pay our own tuition. We have to pay and buy for our own books like everybody else. So don't think we get free education and free housing, because we don't. Some of us, we're paying $1,200 for rent just to pay the bills, just live in a house. That's not included in the power bill. Why are First Nations paying for power in our own country, and it's our resources? You see, if I had money, I would have hired the best lawyers to restore that and see that we don't have to pay it in our own country. I'd also hire the best lawyers to take back the funds that are going into taxes and supposed to be going into the First Nations tax. And then I would ban the government from digging into our money and funds. And then I would make sure that we could have our own president, not like chief that the government chooses and picks, a chief that we pick as a people, that we pick. We should be able to handle our own affairs. Well, if that's true and that's right, whenever the Queen's ready to hand over our land, we're ready. You know, you're leasing and selling it out, we should be benefiting from it. And people think, oh, you have an Indian Affairs. Well, how many Indians have pull in that office? How many Indians are working in that office? You know, I'm hearing some chiefs getting paid $900,000 a year. For what? To keep quiet? To not sign treaties and to sell the land? It's a lot of money. I want all of our chiefs to be audited and investigated. And I want those books and numbers to add up. I want to see my people doing better. I want to see water pipes built on reserves that don't have water. I want those homes upgraded. If there's mold in your home, call the city. Tell them to come in and get a quote and bill it to the reserve. The reserve will pay for it because they have to. Okay? You don't own that home. You're renting it. So that it's the landlord's responsibility to keep that home updated. It is against the law to rent a home out that has mold in it. And you live in a home and there's mold in there and there's not enough heat and there's no insulation, it is your responsibility to report that. You can phone the tenancy branch. You can even go online and download it yourself. Fill out the tenancy branch, take some pictures, write the notes down, go to the doctor, get some reports. If you have children in that home and they're breathing in that mold, I can tell you now, their lungs are being poisoning. Somebody is accountable for that. Somebody needs to be held responsible for that. So you got to take care of that. There's millions and millions of dollars that are supposed to go to the reserves that are being spent, that are not being spent. And you're entitled to it. So I want you all to take care of yourselves. Start looking out for each other. Stop bringing each other down. Because when a native no longer has another native's back, they both lose half their strength. But this is me. I have your back. And this is going to make us stronger if we do this together. So get those homes upgraded. Okay? You're entitled to. It's your money. It's being spent by governments and leaders. And they're loving it. But we're living in like poverty because of it, and it's costing us and our family and our kids. So if you don't have much now, and you know when you're gone, your kids are going to be struggling. So we need to fight for these now. We need to start doing something now, teaching our children how to look out for each other. I know some taxpayers might not believe that First Nations pay into taxes, but it actually does. We pay a lot into it. We actually are overly generous to taxpayers. And just let's get this off the back of our heads right now, that taxes does not benefit 1 cent to First Nations. First Nations don't benefit at all of taxes. We don't even dig into it. We put into it. That money technically was supposed to go to a First Nations trust fund. We need a First Nations tax. You're supposed to be paying your bills, your rent. We're supposed to have free housing, 50-50. That was the treaty. Free medical, forever until the grass stops growing green and the river stops flowing. That's still a treaty. You need to keep your part of the bargain. These are agreements we had for you to live into our country, and these are why our ancestors died fighting. You almost wiped us out so we'd forget. We didn't forget. We're still here. We still remember those treaties and those promises. And if you think you're a better people, start acting like it and start restoring these treaties and start making the wrongs right. Stop comparing yourselves to us, because we're no better than you and you're no better than us. All right? We all bleed the same blood, we all breathe the same air, and we live in the same earth. We're just different people. You don't understand us. Doesn't mean you have to hate us. And we live next door to you, side by side. We don't have a choice. We're prisoners in our own country until those treaties start being restored and we're given back some rights. Every Indian in Canada and America should be given checks every year. You know that? We should be paid. You should be paying us to live in our country. But no, you're paying your own taxes. You're paying your own people to expand and build and benefit your own people. What about us? That money was supposed to be our money for us. You're supposed to be paying us for our oil, our gold, our diamonds, our pearls. You made sure we don't even have a gun shop on a reserve, but you made sure we have smokes to kill us off. On top of that, you made it look like we're getting a deal by making it cheap, but you're actually killing us off. And you want to make sure you're doing it, so you jack the prices to the smokes at half price so that we smoke more and can afford it. And you made sure they're on the reserve too, so we don't have to take trips. Put a gun shop on a reserve then. Put a store on a reserve. Put a dollar store on a reserve. Put a market warehouse on a reserve. Walmart. You know? Put that stuff on a reserve. Not stuff that's going to kill us. You know it's illegal to sell tobacco and liquor on a reserve? That law is still in effect. We could sue millions and billions of dollars and have that all returned. All the taxes that were saved should all be returned to First Nations tax fund. Shouldn't be selling cigarettes on the reserve. You shouldn't even be selling liquor in the Northwest Territories. There's a lot of money being made up there. There's also a lot of natives dying up there and going missing. There's so many going missing and dying up north that they don't even have statistics for the population up there because they're dropping like flies. You know, what they did to Syria is the same thing they did to the Native Americans. The only difference is, back then they didn't have planes and bombs and shit like that. They used disease. Yeah. I could go on forever and talk about this forever. Okay, but I'm actually going to let you go, guys. Okay? Think about it. If you want to collaborate, go ahead, write your comments. I can reply to those. I'll reply to you. If you want proof and evidence, I will provide that. I will provide those treaties, because I have those. I actually have these documents. Many of them. I've done years and years research. I got names, documents, dates, details, stories, books. Books you don't find in a regular library either. I mean, some of this information I have, you can't even take the book out of the library, but I got some of that stuff. And I share that with you guys. You've seen and read a lot of those stories that I have on Facebook. Check out my page. Facebook.com/Cree Native Heart. Teach a lot of history on there. You'll learn some stuff. It's very offensive. I mean, it gets filtered on Facebook. But it's the truth. If we want to build a future together, we must know our past. Not live a lie. Otherwise, we're like rock. If you don't know who you are and you don't know your past, you're a rock, and you're going to just be solid like that. But learn who you are. Learn your past, your history, so that you know where you're going in the future. Have a good day.